Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you've been keeping it cheesy. I'm joined by Hamhawks42. Hamhawks, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's late as usual, like as it often is when we're recording these. So I am a little on the sleepy side, but I got to say the excitement of new cards just invigorates me and gets me totally jazzed up. So I can't wait to jump into this. And also, we're going to be covering black today, which is generally my favorite color in Magic. So I'm really looking forward to diving into these.
Oh yeah. But yeah, we definitely got some more Streets of New Capenna for you here today. Gonna do set review for Black. Hamhawks, where can we find you at?
You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. And I also have my own YouTube channel where I post a lot of janky brews and individual card deep dives. You can check that out. There's going to be a link in the description below. And I'd really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, definitely check out all of Hamhawks content. Always amazing. We're also gonna have another video as well with Hamhawks and John, where they commentate on the top 8 of our latest tournament.
Oh, that was
So
so much
yeah.
fun.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
a great time. So definitely stay tuned for that. You should see that later today if you're watching this in the morning in the US. But we're gonna go ahead and jump right into some cards here. And our first card, excuse me, is Angel of Suffering. That's 3 colorless, 2 black, 5/3. Nightmare Angel with flying. If damage would be dealt to you, prevent that damage and mill twice that many cards instead. Hamhawks, this is a mythic. Does it scream mythics? How do you feel about it?
I like the idea of this card very much. I don't know that it's going to work super well in practice, though. This feels almost like more of a sideboard card against aggro or burn situations where your opponent is going to be dealing lots of damage to you. And you also need to be in a deck that cares about your graveyard. So you want to be able to leverage the graveyard for value or run cards like Gaia's Blessing in older formats. Because if you're in Historic and you add Gaia's Blessing to this, Angel of Suffering basically creates an infinite loop where you'll just be constantly milling and reshuffling your library instead of dying. So that actually is a great way to kind of if thinking of like old school video games, it's kind of activating god mode, if you will, where it becomes impossible to die. Not impossible, but very difficult to kill you, which is fun. Is that really worth this? I don't know. What I want this card to say is every time you would lose life, what I
Mm.
want this card to say is you can't lose the game, and every time you would lose life, mill twice that many cards instead. Because then when you pay life to different effects, you would be milling yourself. That would be very, very valuable. I think the fact that it doesn't do that is very deliberate because it's going to be dependent on your opponent dealing damage to you and or you dealing damage to yourself for in various ways. I mean the like Aghanim Awakening, the bolt lands, those kinds of things. The idea of bolting in a land and instead of shocking yourself, you mill 6 cards. That's actually pretty great. I mean, being able to take advantage of that in those little ways, or no, that's paying life. Never mind. That doesn't work.
Yeah, this card's like kind of.
Anyway,
This card's really
it's so
interesting,
close. It's so close to being awesome, but I don't know that it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if like it costs just like one too much mana because like where Magic's at now, I feel like
Mm.
I kind of want this to be a 4 mana 5/3. I'd be pretty happy with. Yeah, 3 toughness. I feel like it's kind of a big deal. Um, Other than that, I think that it's obviously like a powerful effect. Like the thing is you can if you have other angels out, you can kind of just like freely swing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Yeah, because this basically says, I mean, the 3 toughness is difficult if your opponent's running damage based removal, but if they aren't, then you're not going to be blocking with this anyway because you probably want to be milling those cards. So if your opponent's swinging at you, unless it's a mill out situation, you're probably going to be taking that hit. So yeah, the 3 toughness isn't that big of a drawback, I don't think, in most situations anyway. I don't know. It's an
It's a
interesting
weird card
design.
that
I'm gonna see
like
what we can do with it.
yeah, you like if you do have like damage yourself cards, this is a card that pays off pretty high, right? Where instead of you could care less. Like yeah, Bolus's Citadel is paying life, right?
Hmm.
So you can't can you imagine right this into like Bolus's and then you're just like I guess I'll just mill a few cards and cast most of my deck for free
That'd be pretty fantastic.
until I
Yeah,
hit like
unfortunately,
however many cards and or you could play like a Gaia's Blessing and then ooh, there you go, Ham. That
right?
would be a amazing deck. I mean, I bet you can probably find a way to do that with this card though in historic, right? You can probably find a way like self mirror yourself to the point that yeah, you can probably keep shuffling like your graveyard back in and
Mhm.
somewhat combo off with it's definitely like a combo card or like an overly aggressive card where oh I've just got a bunch of bodies out that can fly, so I'm just gonna keep coming in and you kind of have to outrace me or deal with the threats that I have out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting idea, interesting design. I mean, the fact that it doesn't touch life loss is definitely a bummer. But I like the idea and transitioning. If you're down to like 2 life, for example, if your opponent's done a great job of beating you in the face, being
Hmm.
able to play this out and then all of a sudden changing your life total from your life total to your library size, that can buy you some time in a big way. So, that's not bad.
It'll be interesting to see where we see it, if we see it at all. If anything,
Mhm.
it's could end up being like an EDH type card.
For sure.
I think to
Yeah,
me, I just see it more like a historic combo card if it's constructed playable.
yeah, I can buy that. Like, I wanna see a Janky Brew in standard around this, but I don't know that it's there.
Yeah, definitely probably going to be a mythic for a reason, so we'll see where Angel ends up. Our next card is actually, I think, pretty exciting. I'm actually excited about this. I think we both agreed about it before we started here. So we have Body Launder, 2 colorless, 2 black, 3/3, Ogre Rogue with Death Touch. When another non-token creature you control dies, this card connives. So connive is you draw a card, discard a card. If you discard a non-land card, this card gets a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever this card dies, return another target non-rogue creature card with equal or lesser power from your graveyard to the battlefield. I think that this card is really strong. I think my favorite part about this card is that it's not legendary. How do you feel about this
Yes.
card?
I think it's fantastic. When you're playing reanimator strategies, you need 2 things. You need to be able to fill your graveyard, and you need to be able to well, you need a couple things. You need something worth pulling out of the graveyard for starters. You need a way to get it into the graveyard, and then you need a way to pull it back out. And Body Launderer does 2 out of those 3 things on 1 card. That's really cool. I like that a lot. And the fact that there are so many sacrifice effects running around it. There already were a ton of sacrifice effects running around in standard, and this set is bringing in even more and more good targets for those sacrifice effects. I think we're going to have no problem conniving with the body launderer because creatures are going to be dying left and right. And that's putting bodies into our graveyard, potentially multiple bodies into our graveyard if we're discarding them from our hand. And body launderer's power is going to be growing, making it easier and giving you more viable targets to pull out. I think this card's going to be great. Like, whether it's going to see a ton of play, like, I don't think this is like 4 of slam it because it is a 4 drop after all. But I can imagine in a Rakdos sacrifice style situation or like a reanimator kind of scenario that's trying to ramp up to something like a Velomachus, which is only a 5/5, might be possible. So I want to see that. I want to see that in action. I'm going to see what we can do with this card because I'm going to take this thing for its paces for sure because I think it's got legs.
Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting, reanimating like some big bodies with this. I actually just see this card getting played in just a lot of different decks. The black white mid range decks will play it, just like you said. Those sacrifice type deadly dispute decks. I think that the Rakdos sacrifice decks could play it as well. I mean, just getting back any of your 1 drops, anything that's lower, just for some more value is great. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure either if this is going to end up being a 4 of, but the fact that this card essentially loots and can get some more value when it dies, I think that's really great. I think that the first time that I look at this, I'm like, okay, there's no immediate value, but at the same
Hmm.
time, if you play it and you have a way to sacrifice a creature, or you play it and then you go to your opponent's turn, you have to block, you kind of put them in like an awkward situation with that death touch, then you'll be able to, you know, recur something big from the graveyard that'll be able to help you later in the game.
Yeah. No, and yeah, to your point, I think you're exactly right. You don't need to be grabbing huge bombs, in order to make body launder good value. For if you've connived once, you can pull up like an elite spellbinder with this. You know, that's
Yeah,
pretty
I
great.
mean
And that's just
this
one
this
example.
card's
There's a
just
ton of
great.
stuff out there. Yeah.
like it definitely, we talked about the angel for a little bit here about whether or not that card felt mythic, but the body launder, like this card is definitely a mythic. I think that
Hmm.
the first time I read it, I thought that it was like Ora. Do you know that card? That's the
The
cleric.
cleric from Zendikar, yeah.
Yeah, I think that I can't remember. I think that does it when it dies or any other cleric dies, right?
Yep,
So it has a little bit more of
similar to
like
that.
a overall powerful effect, but this card itself, feeds itself just because you are conniving whenever
Hmm.
any of your other cards die. So, when this card dies, you're going to be able to get something pretty big, pretty juicy, rather than limited by the mana cost, which most of the time we do see these effects around where the mana cost is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think
But
with this card, you get what you pay for. Yeah, you get a lot of great value for 4. It is a 4 drop, so you got to balance that. It's not super cheap, but I'd say it's worth it. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's great. I think that we're definitely going to see this in constructive play. I think that this
Hmm.
card, yeah, you're definitely going to get your bang for your buck with Body Launder. So, final verdict on this: constructive playable for limited. Yeah, it's like a bomb. I mean,
Oh,
it's
totally.
doing like a ton of things. It has Death Touch. Like I think that the Death Touch on this is going to be undervalued for a little bit. In the beginning when you first play it, it's probably going to feel like a defensive card, kind of like a Corpse Connoisseur type card.
Sure.
And then later in the game, when it's like a 4/4 5/5 6/6, you're like, oh wow, that card's like threatening to kill me. And then if I kill it, they're going to get back, maybe something huge or whatever the next biggest threat is. Because even though you might end up having like a reanimator type shell with this card, like let's say where you are getting like a Velomachus or some of these big threats, like at the end of the day, I think that the floor on this card is that it's just like a value engine, right? Where it can
Hmm.
get back a card that has either like an ETB effect, or whenever I see cards like this, I think of like Eye Twitch. Anytime
Yep.
I see a black card that has to do with the card coming back, dying, sacrificing, I'm like, oh man, Eye Twitch. Like, it's just great value. I mean, yeah, sack your Eye Twitch. This gets a counter probably if you connive a non-land card into the graveyard. Like, if you sacrifice this later in the game, you can get that card back, or just trespassers, your connoisseurs. Like there's so much value here with this card. I think that I'm not sure if anyone is valuing this maybe as high as I am, but I think that this card is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I completely agree. I think we're going to see a lot of play on this, and I'm really looking forward to doing weird, janky build rounds. And yeah, like you're saying with in limited, pack one, pick one. If I crack this, I am just over the moon. Yeah, that's amazing.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for this card. Our next card is pretty cool as well. It's pretty interesting. Cemetery Tampering, 2 colorless and a black enchantment. It has Hideaway when Hideaway 5, excuse me, when this enchantment enters the battlefield. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Exile one face down, then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill 3 cards. Then, if there are 20 or more cards in your graveyard, you may play the exile card without paying its mana cost. How do you feel about this card? I think that it has some potential, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like it very much. I'm going to be building a number of decks around it, but I don't know that it's going to be. I mean, this card has my name written all over it. Like, I love reanimator strategies, and anything that can allow me to cheat stuff in early, and fill my graveyard is really what I want to be doing. So this is like 100% the card for me. And the first thing that I thought of with that hideaway was, you look at the top 5 cards. If you see a reanimation spell in there, okay, great. You're gonna have something in your graveyard to pull up because you got 20 cards in there. But if you also see one of your reanimator threats, like a Toxtrol, Velomachus, one of these other, or Xander, um, you wouldn't mind hiding that away either, because being able to just cast it for free is fine too. Um, so I think that actually, I mean, the flavor of this, the concept behind it, as far as reanimator shells go, it fits really, really nicely in there. And those decks, oftentimes, you want to be spending your 1, 2, and 3 drops filling your graveyard. So that's exactly what this does. So I think that's quite strong. It is a 3 mana do nothing when it first hits the field. So that is definitely a knock against it, which is why I don't know that it's going to see a ton of standard play. Also, 20 cards in your graveyard is no small feat. That is a lot. So you need to be doing other mill stuff too. Like, you just have to be. You can't be depending on cemetery tampering to fill your graveyard completely on its own, in my opinion, and get there. But if you can get there, it could be very powerful.
Yeah, I think this is like a really great payoff for any deck that's self mill or like a graveyard strategy type
Hmm.
deck. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much potential. Like, I don't think that you're going to be able to cast the card for free. Like, let's say you are the fight card. That's green. I'm sorry, I can't remember what the name of it is right now, but
No worries.
um, like that card, I think that you can get off a lot quicker. But this card is more like a synergy card overall for your deck, and I think that that goes a long way more. I think it's gonna be good. I 3 mana is kind of interesting just because most of the black decks don't necessarily have many 3 drops. I think, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, at this point, one of the 3 drops that I've been using in a lot of my Sultai or Abzan Reanimator shells is Old Rutstein, and I think I would prefer Cemetery Tampering over Old Rutstein. Now, Rutstein gives you value in that what it mills. You create tokens, but either treasure, a 1/1 insect, or blood tokens, which is fine. But Cemetery Tampering mills 3 instead of just 1, which is pretty fantastic, and that hideaway payoff later is pretty awesome. Whereas Rutstein, you get a 1/4, which isn't nothing, but the top end on tampering is just better. Whereas, and I think Redstein is the closest comparison you get to it, to something like this. It's the only other 3 drop I can really think of in that other or Celestis is another good 3 drop in a lot of those reanimator shells as well, because it can loot for you. But with how many connive triggers we have going around, Celestis might be obsolete in that deck now. I don't know. We'll see.
We also have to remember that this doesn't necessarily do something when it comes into play. Like this doesn't come into play and mill you. You actually only hide away.
Hmm.
So I think that the fact that maybe you get the effect on your upkeep probably plays too much of a big role for this card to matter, maybe. Just because of the
Possible.
fact that if you play it down and then let's say they answer it with like a charm or, some kind of card, nowadays a lot of people have removal for artifacts and enchantment in their deck. So I think that the fact that this only goes and exiles a card out of your deck without giving you any immediate value might end up being the too risky for this card to get played,
Yeah, I can see that.
especially at the mana cost too.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
All right, so our next card here, we have a Corrupt Court Official, which is actually pretty much just like a reprint. Pretty much just like a Ravenous Rats type card. The original card was in Portal. Not really much to see here. It's colorless and a black for a 1/1. When it comes into play, target opponent discards a card. Hamhocks, just
Yeah,
good
I
draft
mean, this is
card, pretty much about
this
as
is a
far as it
draft card.
goes.
It's
Yeah.
if you have a weird Turgor deck where you're currently running, burglar rats or the Skemfar Shadow Sage, or not Shadow Sage. What's the one I'm thinking of? Elderfang Disciple. That's the one. If
Hmm.
you're running those, then all right, Crowd Court Official gives you another option, but you're probably already doing fine in that front. So I don't know. It's a fine card. I think the fact that it's from Portal 3 Kingdoms is interesting, but I don't know. There's nothing else to really say on that.
Yeah, just a draft card, pretty much.
Hmm.
Next card as well is about the same, but I actually think it's a pretty decent card for the cost and the rate. So we have a Crooked Custodian, a colorless, and a black. Ogre Rogue. When this card enters the battlefield and enters tapped, 3/2. I think for limited, I like this card. It's a pretty decent 2 drop. It's got 3 power. I mean, it's probably gonna trade up. The only
Yeah,
downside, obviously, is if you're behind and you have it, it comes into play tap. But I think in those decks and in those circumstances, you're probably losing anyway. So the aggressive decks are gonna want this, and I mean, I don't really see anything wrong with it. It's just a solid 2 drop, right? For
yeah.
limited.
Absolutely. For limited, it's a solid 2 drop. And we had in some of our spoiler videos, we talked about a couple of cards with casualty that have either casualty 3 or casualty X. And being able to have a 3 power creature on board on turn 2 can really help enable those. And Crooked Custodian gives you an option to do that at common, which is kind of nice. So I don't know. There could be some synergies there, but for the most part, yeah, I think this is a decent draft 2 drop.
Oh yeah, for sure. And our next card here, we talked about this a little bit in our spoilers here. Cut of the Prophets, X double black sorcery, casualty 3. As you cast a spell, you may sacrifice a creature, power total 3 or greater. When you do copy the spell, you draw X cards and lose X life. Casualty, essentially, you'll see all kinds of numbers, kind of variance for it, but Yeah, I mean, this card could end up being pretty good if you do it for two. If you do it for more, obviously the payouts are higher, and if you have life gain in the form of, I don't know, like a meat hook massacre, other ways of gaining life, then I think the ceiling of this card gets a lot higher, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This is the kind of thing where I look at it like draw X cards and lose X life because we're in black. Okay, fine. I think of it as like a 5 drop, being able to draw 3 cards. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But then the moment you sacrifice a body, which could be like the custodian, for example, all of a sudden for 5 mana, you're drawing 6 cards. Now you are losing 6 life, so yeah, to your point, you need to buffer that somehow. But I think that the upside on this card is fantastic because at the end of especially in formats like limited, that where the games end up kind of grinding out sometimes, and it really does come down to who can see the most cards late in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like Cut of the Profits gives you that immediately, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's gonna be interesting to see what deck it goes into,
Hmm.
and potentially how many as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
just being like a draw X later in the game is still great, right?
Oh yeah, even if you don't have a body or you don't want to use the casualty ability because you don't want to sacrifice anything, if you've got 7 mana lying around, just drawing 5 cards. You have to lose 5 life, so that's the biggest cost that you really need to worry about. But
We've seen it though on stream, like these mid-range decks getting these grindy stalemates where they're both at like 19, 23 or something, and they got like two cards left in their hand and you need like some kind of gas to get you back in. And I mean, this is like the type of card that you want. On top of that, like if you have like a connoisseur or anything like that laying around, then yeah, you don't mind sacking it if you get to double up on the fact that you got to make your opponent discard one of their best cards, and then now you're drawing like upwards of 3 or 4 cards. So yeah, I mean, this card's great. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see where it shows up. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of good black cards in this set for standard. Like, I feel like black
yes.
got buffed quite a lot with alchemy, in
Hmm.
the alchemy format. So yeah, I mean, I like this set a lot, and so far out of all the black cards that we talked about, I think that you know there's definitely like more of a power level here in this color for sure.
Absolutely. And there's one other note on Cut of the Profits that I do want to make that I think is kind of silly. So this card is depicting the creation of golden bars, but it doesn't make treasure tokens. What's up
kind
with
of
that? Every
kind
other
of
card in this
interesting.
set makes treasure tokens. Why not? Anyway, um,
Because it's greedier than treasure tokens.
that's
It's
true. It is greedier.
cards. And you have
Fair
to pay
enough. Anyway,
life.
I always thought that was like Flavor Flea. Is that a win? I don't. Yeah. Anyway,
I really like that artwork too. It's great.
it is. It's very like it's really creepy, and the more you look at it, just the creepier it gets. Which is exactly like I mean that in the best way. Like that's yeah, really cool stuff.
Oh yeah. I'm actually excited about this next card. I actually think that this card has a chance to be played in constructed. Cutthroat Contender.
Hmm.
1 black, 1/1 Vampire Warrior. Pay a life. It gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Activate once a turn. There's not many like black 1 drops. I think we only have the red one that if a vampire dealt damage, you can sack a vampire to draw 2 cards, right? It's like you have to discard then draw 2. I can't remember what the name of the card is. I do apologize. It's from Innistrad block, but I think that having this and that kind of gives vampires a curve, right? You have more
Yeah.
of ability to go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop into maybe I'm so sorry I can't remember names. Oh, Florian. You can go
Oh
right
yeah.
into
Yeah.
Florian. So I mean, what do you think? Do you think I don't really like? Yeah, this is like okay, like draft material, but I think when I look at this card, I think more like constructed, right? Like, not gonna lie, obviously, you got some of your bomb mythics and stuff, but just having some more curve to your deck helps, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And Cutthroat Contender. Now, when you first look at it, it can become a 2/1 if you're willing to pay a little bit of life, which I love the flavor on that. The idea that like if you give this particular vampire a little bit of blood, it becomes stronger. Like, okay, I like that. It makes sense. And having a 2/1 for one is just something that can be very valuable in a wide variety of situations. It's good on the attack, it's good on the block. It's good to enable, again, casualty triggers. There are some casualty 2 triggers, being able to use that here because later in the game you have no problem sacrificing your 1 drop to trigger, a good casualty effect. So I think you're right. This card could see some play, and it's a common, just a good playable common, which is something that you don't see, don't always see. And we got one here, I think.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, this card doesn't seem like much, but I consider it more constructed card than limited card.
Hmm.
Limited. I
I
mean,
think
you got plenty of 2 mana 2/2s, right?
right in limited, it's going to be great if you can hit it on turn one.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get 4-6 damage in with it, great. But if you draw this late in the game, it's going to feel awful.
Yeah, if it's a
Yeah.
Goblin Guide or a Swift Spear, it feels great. If
Mm-hmm.
it's an Unflipped Delver,
Oh.
probably
Ooh.
hurts a little bit more,
Mm-mm.
right? We all know those types of feelings with those specific cards, but
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I definitely expect to see this in limited too. I mean, if there's like enough of like an aggressive strategy, then like some of the other, I think there's some other cards that I talked about that fit into that like aggressive type strategy. So you could definitely end up seeing that card there too. But for me, I think this is more like a constructed card, and limited, it's a little bit more on the lower end, unless
Yeah.
you have a few more of them. And Kamigawa would have been great for ninjutsu, but in this set,
Oh my goodness, yes.
I think not as good. I think that
Yeah.
this card is actually really good for limited. It's a little bit expensive for a removal spell, considering it doesn't kill a creature, but deal gone bad. So removal spell gone bad. 3 colorless and a black instant. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. Target player mills 3 cards. So yeah, it's an instant. So you can mill yourself. You can mill your opponent. You can kill something that's 3 toughness at least. You can even kill stuff that's indestructible. Uh, it's 4 mana though, so I mean, if you really need removal, I mean, I don't mind one of these. I mean, in some cases, I'd probably take a couple of these just because I myself rate removal a little bit higher, but I don't necessarily think that this card is like a slam dunk or anything, considering there's murder in the set.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of agree. I feel like for 4 mana, it's just a little too much. I feel like at instant speed, this should cost 3 mana. And to be honest, I wouldn't have even been mad at like these effects. Feel like they could, given the nature of power creep nowadays, make it 2, and it'd be okay.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that wouldn't be that unreasonable.
Last
And
gasp with upside.
yeah, like I feel like something like that would be all right. Being able to mill yourself is nice. I like that. And the fact that yeah, it's not the creature's controller mills 3, it's target player mills 3. So that flexibility is really cool. But yeah, for 4 mana, I don't think you're getting enough here.
And your slight reanimator theme and limited, this card's good. You kill something and mill yourself that maybe go off next turn with like a big payoff, but
Maybe. Yeah, something
you
like that
know
would be neat. But
Yeah, this
I
is
don't
a
know how
lower
likely
end card, I think, in
yeah,
terms
I don't
of
know how likely you're gonna be
everything.
to get there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just lower end card overall, limited constructed. There's just way better cards than that. This card is
Hmm.
interesting though because we see this ability in blue a lot more. Demons do 3 colorless and a black instant. Scry 2, then draw 2. You lose 2. Lots of 2s.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean usually we see this in blue where you scry a couple, draw a couple. The multiverse is the blue card that comes in my mind that gets played a lot in standard or
Yep, behold,
alchemy.
behold the multiverse. Yeah.
Yeah, but that one also does have foretell, so it's a little bit more flexible. So I think that this card you're going to see a lot more in limited. I think this is one of the more better effects of them printing in terms of the you draw 2, lose 2 for 4 mana instant speed. Sign in blood at home. I think this is pretty good though, considering you get to scry. So I wouldn't mind having at least one of these usually in my mid-range year to control decks in limited. I think that's really about it. In constructed, I mean, I'm not gonna say never.
Right.
Okay, deluge maybe. I mean, we've seen the blue versions of this get played. Could black end up playing it even at 4 mana? Not sure.
Yeah, I mean, being able to dig potentially 4 cards deep to find what you need, that's not nothing. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, for 4 mana, it is a lot, and this does feel like a blue effect, aside from the life loss part.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think it's interesting. The fact that it's an instant makes it even a consideration. If that was
Yeah.
sorcery speed, get out of here. I'm absolutely not touching it.
Yeah, the card's bad, right? Like if it's sorcery.
But being able to hold mana up for your removals or your flash threats, and then be able to hit this, to dig, all of a sudden, black mid-range decks be that I mean they're already good to be fair, but they might be able to take advantage of this in cool ways. So I don't know. There might be a home for it.
Could end up being a card we end up seeing later once like Deadly Disputes and stuff have rotated.
Yeah, probably. I think that's what it would take to really take this to the next level. Yeah.
Just because it costs too much mana for those decks. Those decks are a little bit more mana efficient than this, like this card is more of more closer to like the mid-range to control type shell, but if you're playing blue, I mean, you're gonna play Deluge and other cards that are better, so maybe this card's more suited for decks that aren't blue, but we'll see.
100%.
Alright, so we have Dig Up the Body. This card's okay. 2 colorless black. Instant casualty 1, mill 2. Then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. You can copy it. So it's pretty interesting because you can sacrifice a creature for the casualty and then end up using this. You can end up getting back the same creature that you sacrificed to the original one, right? Because the first one is going to get something, and this doesn't say target. It just says return a creature card from your graveyard. So it's kind of interesting, right? Wouldn't you say? You can almost get some value out of like maybe sacking to get the value off the sack and then getting another creature back that you actually want. I'm talking mostly in limited, though. In limited.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree with that. I think it's more of a limited card. It reminds me of cards like Macabre Waltz or Blood for Bones that allow you to kind of do this shuffle between your graveyard play and your hand. And maybe not Blood for Bones, because that you do get one onto the battlefield, which is very different. But so I feel like Dig Up the Body's fine. It's going to be valuable if the mill is valuable for you. If that mill isn't worth anything for you, or it's not particularly impressive for you, this is a hard pass. You don't want to touch this card. But if you can take advantage of milling yourself and possibly digging for an answer, it could be interesting. And I think you're right. It's more of a limited card. These Raise Dead style effects generally don't make it into standard very often, unless they're tacked on to something else,
like unless
they're a bonus.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Like a Colligan's Command?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, this card's just straight limited. Let's dig it up out of here. This next card also a limited card, but I think it's kind of an interesting card overall. So we have Dusk Mangler, 5 colorless, 2 black, 5/4 horror. Additional cost to cast the spell. Sack a creature, discard a card, or pay 4 life. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature, discards a card, and loses 4 life. Yeah, I mean, this card does a lot of things, actually. I feel like for me, I'm probably just going to want to pay the 4 life most of the time for it, but not even sure I want to play this card in limited. I mean, it costs 7 mana. The body's... it needs, like, menace. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
No, there definitely needs to be more to it. For a 7-drop with an additional cost to cast it, even with that really sweet ETB, it's not quite worth it unless you're playing on a budget. That's one situation. If you're in Constructed and you want to play Reanimator, but you just can't afford all the mythics and the rare Reanimator threats, Dusk Mangler actually can be a really cool reanimation threat. Because a 5/4 body on turn 4 or 5, when you pull it out of the yard, is not nothing. It's fine. But you get to bypass that additional the additional cost, so you don't have to pay the 4 life or discard a card yourself, but you do hit your opponent, make them sacrifice your creatures, discard a card, and lose 4 life. Because that's a fun thing. With the cost and the effect. With the cost, it's an or. You do one of those things. For your opponent on the ETB, it's an and. They do all of it.
Yeah, they have to do everything.
Yeah, so it's pretty mean. It kind of reminds me of it reminds me a little bit of cards like Invoke Despair, or like this is Xander at home, is really what we're looking at here. Because it's got that ETB effect that just punches your opponent in the face. And I don't know, if you're playing Reanimator on a budget, Dusk Mangler is a fine target. So that's one of the things. I'm probably going to end up trying to build a budget Reanimator deck using primarily commons and uncommons. And Dusk Mangler is going to be the key threat there. Also, if you can do Blinky shenanigans, if you can do stuff where you can like recur it repeatedly or hit it with a teleportation circle or something like that, so you can recur that enter the battlefield effect, that could get out of hand pretty fast.
Kiki Jiki's in. I mean, listen, I'm not going to say never. Kiki Jiki exists. If you can cheat this out and then literally start to Kiki Jiki your opponent. I don't know. What was the mythic? Whatever the mythic is, the one that gets back a creature good to its power, if you can connive that a little bit.
Yep. Yeah.
And then get this out and then start Kiki Jiking. Or if you Kiki Jiki the card that gets back the cards from the graveyard. Man, I didn't even think about that. That's like Oh no, that's like out of control. We're
Kiki
talking
Jiki.
about Dust Mangler, and then we're going back to this mythic now, and I'm thinking, man, this Kiki Jiki's gonna mess everybody's day up, actually.
Yeah, Body Launderer with Kiki Jiki is going to be gross. And it's a 3
Oh,
drop into a 4 drop. It even fits on curve. Yeah, that's going to be bad.
all
And
right,
by bad, I mean
let's.
awesome. I need to do that immediately.
Yeah. Let's move on to this next card before I throw up. Um, so we have Extract of Truth, colorless black sorcery. Choose one. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a creature, enchantment, planeswalker card. From it, that player discards that card. Target opponent sacks an enchantment. We've seen this before. Now it's like fine, nothing to see here, really, right?
Yeah, I mean the fact that the discard effect it can hit creatures is I think is meaningful. Creatures and planeswalkers. I mean that gives you access to a lot of the more powerful threats. I mean you can discard a lot of really meaningful threats. And a common that's not bad. I mean if you're in a deck that is currently running check for traps, I mean extract the truth would fit into that same slot. Is really what it comes down to. So again, maybe after rotation, extract the truth is going to be a little more important. But for right now, I think there are better discard options in duress and check for traps. But it's there. And target opponent sacrifices an enchantment. There are a lot of cool enchantments running around out there. And if your opponent has slammed, like just windmill slammed a Kami Warren, it's the only thing they have. Yeah, that's going to feel great if you can hit it. But that's really situational.
Yeah, I would have been happy if this was just straight non-land card. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. Like if it was non-land card and then they sack an enchantment, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. I guess black doesn't really destroy artifacts or enchantments usually, but this at least that like lately, it's been
Yeah,
able
they've
to
added
target
a little more
enchantments more.
enchantment removal to their suite. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's fine. Probably wouldn't play it in limited and constructed.
Hmm.
I don't really think so.
Yeah. I think we have better options right now, is really what it comes
Yeah.
down to. Yeah.
This other card I actually think is interesting because we see a variant of this every single set. This is fake your own card at this point. So fake your own death. A colorless and a black instant until on a turn, target creature gets +2/+0. Gains whenever this creature dies. Return the battlefield tapped under its own control, and you create a treasure token. So, I mean, listen, it's ramp.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna discount it, but it's bad ramp. So I mean, in limited, maybe getting the mana's better, but in constructed, I think we just move on from this.
Yeah, figuring out like this style effect, you're exactly right. There's one in every set. It always feels like it should be really good. And if you can combine it with like if you live out the dream, fake your own death on a Dusk Mangler, after your opponent sets up a block, you kill the opponent's things, Dusk Mangler dies, it comes back in, you get that into the battlefield trigger, you feel like $1,000,000. But that is a very rare scenario. And most of the time, these instant speed savior thing, black resurrection effects are I don't know, they're just kind of underwhelming. They end up being dead cards in your hand way too often.
Yeah, I'm not really too much of a fan of it, even in limited. The treasure makes me feel a little bit more excited, but
Yeah.
other than that, I think I'm good. This next card is a little bit interesting, at least. Saw a little bit of this in the set review, or the spoiler review, but not too much. Girder Goons, 4 colorless, and a black 4/4 Ogre Warrior. When this card dies, you create a 2/2 black rogue creature tapped token. Then it also has Blitz. You can cast a spell for its Blitz Claw, so it gains haste. When this dies, draw a card, then you sacrifice it, begin next end step. I mean, in limited, I like this card a lot. I mean, on raid, it's not bad. 5 mana 4/4. When it dies, you get a creature. On top of that, if you end up wanting to be aggressive and wanting to just get it out, either way, you can just 4 mana, try to hit them or, kill a creature on blocks. And then when it dies, not only do you draw a card, but you get a 2/2 rogue as well. I actually think in limited, I'm probably going to be drafting or seeing this card possibly quite a lot just because I think the value on Blitz and this card specifically is actually really good, right?
Absolutely. The fact that the Blitz creature replaces itself in your hand, and in this case, even puts a body on board too, like I think that is actually a pretty useful mechanic, and I think it's better than it might read even.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Girder Goons is a great example of just a bread and butter Blitz creature. And so yeah, I think you're right. In limited, this is going to be a house. I don't think it does enough for constructed, but in limited play, it's going to be great.
Yeah, it feels really powerful for limited. Just at a common, just being able to get that 4/4 body down, and if you need to just haste it out to like redraw or stay on curve, then yeah, like I said, either you're gonna trade with something or kill something, and then or even deal 4 damage, and then you get a 2/2 that stays. So, I mean, yeah, essentially it's 4 mana, deal 4, get a 2/2 creature, and draw a card. I mean, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, you can do a lot worse than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, definitely be on the lookout for this in Limited specifically. Our next card, we have an uncommon here. We have a Reanimator spell. 4 colorless and a black sorcery. This spell has flash as long as there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. I actually think that, like, this card having flash could be powerful.
Hmm.
Other than that, I'm not sure how I feel about Graveyard Shift. What do you think?
I like it. I think being able to reanimate a spell or being able to reanimate a creature at instant speed is a big deal. You know, just like we saw with Wandering Emperor, like something having flash that usually doesn't have flash can be very, very powerful. And Graveyard Shift is up there. Yeah, did I just compare Graveyard Shift to the Wandering Emperor? Yeah, I went there. You feel free to call me crazy in the comment section below, and while you're there, leave a like.
Oh, yeah, there we
But
go.
so I think this card is actually really strong because it can set up some really cool attacks or really cool situations where your opponent tries to attack in, and all of a sudden they're staring down a huge monster that just came out of your graveyard that they didn't see coming, and that could be really fantastic. Also, being able to cast this on your opponent's end step and then untap with whatever the thing is that you just that you just reanimated. I think is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I think the lines of play you're going to get with this are like a game changer for reanimation decks. That said, reanimation decks haven't been really viable recently, aside from alchemy with assemble from parts. Um, and 5 mana reanimation is still 5 mana reanimation. It's tough to get there. It just is. And I don't think that's going to change here. The instant speed interaction is great, but in order to take advantage of it, you have to have a lot of stuff in your graveyard. Like your graveyard needs to be stacked because 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard. The chances of you having 5 cards in your graveyard and they happen to be the right 5 mana values, shockingly low. Like when you think of like this it's not keyworded in the set, but we've seen a couple of cards with this that have that if you have 5 or more mana values
Mm-hmm.
text. It reminds me of Threshold, but with Threshold you only needed 7 cards. It didn't
This
matter
is
what cards they were.
more like Delirium.
More like yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that this has more of like a feel like Delirium, where instead of card types, it's values. But in reality, it's almost like having Delirium, where I mean, your mana values come from your different card types sometimes, anyways. So,
sure.
you know, your land 0, you know, you get a couple enchantments that cost 1 or something in there. I mean, I I agree with you 100%. I think that that's gonna end up being the hardest payoff to try to get off this card, is the
Hmm.
fact that you literally have to have at least like, if you don't get lucky and get Delirium, you know, if you don't get lucky and hit the 5 cards that have different mana values, you know, you're not going to be able to cast this at instant speed. So you need like 8 to 10 cards at least in your graveyard,
Pretty much.
and
Yeah,
your deck
and
has to have all kinds of different. You have to have curve throughout your deck.
yes, exactly. Yeah, the deck you have to build your deck so that you can realistically hit those 5 different mana values. Which I mean, your deck should have a decent curve anyway, but you gotta I don't know, you have to work around that in the deck building. So I think the card has a lot of upside, but most of the time it's probably going to be a sorcery speed spell. And sorcery speed 5 mana reanimate a thing. There are plenty of spells that do that. And it does what it does. It doesn't feel great when you hit it. You know, you really want to be hitting something at 3 or 4, but you know, when 5 is what it takes, 5 is what you'll do. And if you're pulling
Mm-hmm.
a 7 or 8 drop out of the graveyard, you don't mind that. You know, spending 5 mana in a mono black deck to pull a coma out of the graveyard is lovely. I can't tell you how many times
Add
I've
instant
had
speed.
people in I'm sorry? At
Add
instant
instant
speed,
speed.
exactly. It feels great. Um, I can't tell you how many times I've had my chat go, why is coma in there? You don't have any blue mana in the mana base." Like, yeah, I know.
Don't worry
And
about it.
anyway, so yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get there. It's fine. Yeah. But Graveyard Shift is it's a cool design space. I like the thought, even if the restriction. Like, I wish it was easier to flash this card, but we'll see how easy it is to mill. Is really what it comes
Mm-hmm.
down to. If you can mill effectively, really, really hard, then Graveyard Shift is going to be great. And I think that I don't know. We'll see. Well, yeah, I think it has good potential though.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
Uh,
sorry, I have a lot of thoughts on that card.
no,
I
I mean that
that was
card's
one of them that
sweet.
got previewed. It's like, ooh, they got my letters. This one's for me. All right.
That card's sweet, I think. We'll see if
Yeah.
it gets played. It does have like a high ceiling,
Hmm.
with like a kind of rough floor, so we'll see where it
Yeah.
ends up going. Our next card here, we have Grizzly Sigil, 1 black sorcery, casualty 1. Choose target creature or planeswalker. If it was dealt non-combat damage this turn, it deals 3 damage to it and you gain 3. Otherwise, it deals 1 to it and you gain 1. This could end up being a really powerful removal spell in the black sacrifice decks where you end up just lightning helixing a creature or planeswalker for 4 damage and gaining 4. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see where this card slots in limited. I think your deck still has to be built for this type of card. So going to be, in the beginning of the draft when you take it, you probably want to build towards more of that casualty. And later in the game, if you've already been towards casualty, you're going to want it. If not, then you might end up passing on a card like this. But I think that, yeah, there's a lot of potential for this in Constructed and in Limited. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. 1 mana, and I think it's going to be a phenomenal way to snipe planeswalkers, be able to pick them off. Because if your opponent drops a Lulth and down ticks it, you can just Grizzly Sigil. You don't even need to casualty it. You can just knock the little guy out. Actually, and if you casualty it, you can also knock out one of the spiders.
Mm-hmm.
And and if you sacrifice a Shambling Ghast, you can kill the other spider. Like so I mean, yeah, is that a magical Christmas land scenario? Absolutely. But
But
is
it could
that a
happen.
scenario?
It could
It could
happen.
happen.
Yeah.
It's not crazy. We're talking about having 2 cards on the board, or 3 if you're gonna, that's not out of the realm of possibility. So
Yeah.
I
How
think
many
Grizzly
people?
Sigil is going to be. I think Grizzly Sigil is going to pick off a lot of Wandering Emperors and a lot of lulls. I think is really what
Yeah,
we're
the
going to
Lulth
see.
play is. I think you're definitely going to see that. Like, how many people discounted Deadly Dispute?
Oh my goodness!
And Deadly Dispute is like a $3 common in real life, right? Like,
Right?
that card's real. It's a real deal. I
Yeah.
mean, and this isn't draw cards. I mean, we went over some a card in blue that was a little bit more related to Deadly Dispute, but to everything that you're saying, I mean, there's so much value to this card. I think that at first glance it doesn't seem like it's doing much, but the scenarios that you can come up with this card are just like, yeah, it ends up being some crazy plays for, I don't know, 1 to 3 mana investment of this card when you're sacking something.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I just think it's just good value, and
Oh
you gain
yeah.
life. Nothing wrong with that.
Value and life, I'm in.
I'm
That's
in
the
exactly.
combo
What
I've
more do
been
you
waiting
need?
for. This next card I think is like Hearsay had said, maybe more for EDH, but illicit shipment. 3 colorless, 2 black sorcery, casualty 3. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Yeah, I mean, for 5 mana, if you sack something with 3 power or greater, you get to double tutor. But in all honesty, these effects don't even get played anymore. Maybe if it was like 1998 to 2000, I would potentially be like, yeah, this card's crazy. You get 2 of your best cards. But
Mm.
nowadays, I mean, 5 mana, and it doesn't win me the game right now. Ham, I don't even want to play this. Like, what are we
No, I'm
doing
right there
here?
with you. I'm right there with you. In my EDH deck, being able to search up 2 things for 5 and possibly get a sack trigger. All right, nice. I can do
Mm-hmm.
something with that. But maybe even then, it's not really giving you a ton of value. So in constructed, absolutely not. And tutors in limited are generally a waste of time because with how many great card draw spells there are out there that also scry for you, I would rather just for 5 mana, I would rather draw 6 cards or whatever, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which is practically what you're able to do these days. I think that is you're just going to end up drawing into whatever you need as long as you keep churning through your deck. Whereas these tutors, I think, are just a little overpriced. Yeah.
Yeah, cards they print now. I mean, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go get my 1 card, and it's like, your opponent's like, well, I play this 1 card that is like a 3 for 1. So like, I mean, I got the cards I needed off this 1 card. It's kind of where Magic's at, and EDH is a little bit different. I mean, yeah, there's some value stuff like that, but this card's still really good because you can go get like your 2 missing combo pieces and then win, or with your infinite mana, you can literally just win on the spot with a card like this. So
Sure.
in that format, I think that makes a little bit more sense. In constructed or limited, I think that this card's just too slow.
Hmm.
Like a
Yeah. No, you
regular
pass on
constructed,
it
excuse
every
me.
time.
Yep.
Yeah.
This next card is actually really interesting, I think. A colorless and a black incriminate. Sorcery. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by the same player. That player sacrifices 1 of them. Unlimited, I mean, this card could end up being really good early in the game. You do have to choose 2 target creatures, so no matter what, you can't just choose 1 and they have to sacrifice it. Your opponent's always going to choose. Maybe it's not as good, right? I'm not sure. It's probably just jank. It's probably like just
Maybe.
straight
I
jank.
mean, it's jank removal, but I mean, going up against like the runes deck, for example, being able to say like, well, I see your 9/9 generous visitor and your, you know, 7/8 Runeforge champion. Well, sacrifice one of those. Like, well, crap. I don't want, for 2 mana. Like, all right, that feels pretty good. I mean, to that point, they're still going to beat you in the face next turn because you may not have an answer to the other one. But it's an interesting idea, and cards that create a little mini game like this that I enjoy. I find them fun. So I kind of like the idea, but it is restricted in that your opponent has to have 2 target creatures. Whereas like this almost looks like a better Diabolic Edict, because if you have an Edict effect, and that just says a target player sacrifices a creature, if they only have 1 creature down, boom, you got them. And that feels great. In this case, they have to have 2, so you can't just ice 1 creature if it's just chilling by itself, which is a problem. That's a big problem. And if your opponent, but this is better because if your opponent has a wide board, you can pick 2 of the most reasonable threat or 2 of the biggest threats and hit those, and isolate them for that edict effect. So that's nice. I mean, this feels like it really depends on who you're going up against for whether or not this is going to be valuable. And it's pretty janky because it is a 2 mana sorcery. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's janky removal, but I don't know. It could be fun to play with a little bit, but it's not going to be better as, I mean, to your point earlier. I mean, murders in this set.
Yeah.
It's
If this was instant
yeah,
speed, I think it would be better. Like
hmm
overall, but the fact that it's a
absolutely,
sorcerer, I think ties it down too much.
yeah,
Just because you're
agreed.
losing like massive tempo on a card like this.
Hmm.
Our next card here. I actually think this card's pretty decent. 4 colorless and a black. Join the Maestro's Sorcery Casualty 2. Create a 4/3 black Ogre Warrior creature token. I think for 5 mana, this card's kind of absurd because I mean, in limited specifically, this card's absurd. Where like when you get to 5, you can just sack like your 2-drop or something, or you pay 1 life for that vampire we talked about. That's a 1-drop.
Yep.
You get your attack in. If it gets through, you just sack it, and now you got 2 4/3s on the battlefield on turn 5, or if you ram to it one of your treasures, or 2 your treasures, 3 or 4. I mean, yeah, this card, yeah, for 5 mana, 8 power. I mean, yeah, I like this card a lot,
Yeah,
actually. You don't
I like
want
it
a
a lot
lot,
too.
but
No, I like it a lot too. When I first looked at it, I remember thinking like, well, you have to sacrifice a body to get 2 bodies. Is that really worth it? But the thing you're sacrificing compared to what you get is definitely meaningful. And yeah, you're like you're saying, 5 mana, 8 power. The math checks out. Yeah.
yeah, definitely on curve. But yeah, mostly a limited card. I'm a fan of it. I'll be
Yeah.
drafting
No,
it.
I'd agree with that.
Next card as well, just really good limited card here. 2 colorless and a black 3/1 human citizen Maestro's Initiate. 4 colorless and a hybrid blue red. Exile this card from your graveyard. Draw 2, then discard a card. Yeah, not really much else to say. I mean, it's on curve. It's got 3 power. The 1 toughness a little bit disappointing, but you got that high upside with that graveyard ability. So, at a common, I don't mind having like 2 or 3 of these even in my deck, just because I can just trade them, like either go higher in the curve with the trade or just outright trade with something that's just 3 toughness overall. And then later in the game, I know that I'll be able to cash it away and get at least a card out of it and be able to cycle through 2 cards, or even get some value if I'm able to use that discard in a meaningful way. But mostly a limited card.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you're saying. Decent limited card, and it's nice that the activated ability is splashable. The fact that it's blue or red, so no matter what kind of deck you're building, if you're in any 2 of these colors, you'll be able to cash in on that. So yeah, good limited card.
Yeah, solid card. Yeah, and that's actually like a really great point as well. The fact that you're able to put this either in 2-color decks, or if you are the 3-color decks, right, it's goes great too.
Hmm.
But the flexibility of this card is great. I just really like cards like this where you're just getting value early, value later, and cards are never dead in Magic nowadays. So yeah, we talk about the demonic tutor that we just
Hmm.
talked about or whatever, and I mean this card's just better, right? You get a creature up front at a lower rate, and then later in the game for the same mana cost, you pretty much get to dig into your deck and maybe even get some of the same payoffs. So kind of funny where we go from like an uncommon to common, but I like that
Absolutely.
card quite a lot.
Yeah.
This next card, I'm not sure. This one needs to go back to 1995. We got Midnight Assassin. 2 colorless and a black 1/2 flying death touch vampire assassin. Yeah. That's it. Moment of silence for Midnight
I mean,
Assassin.
Death Touch, flying. It's nice, I guess. But is it worth 3 mana? Yeah, I don't know. That's
Vampire Nighthawk, not at home.
no. This is yeah, not even.
uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, in limited, it's a fine defensive card, but you need to be in a deck that wants to be defensive. So I'd put that more of a controlling deck more than an aggro deck because a
yeah.
1 power 3 drop is just not where you want to be if you're trying to be aggressive.
If you really need some vampires,
Right? Yeah, if you're hurting for
yeah,
vamps,
yeah. If you're
this yeah,
hurting, I mean, we're talking like, ooh, you're desperate for some vampires. You probably want this card. But other than that, I mean, not really much else to say about
yeah.
Midnight Assassin. The next card, though, I'm actually excited about for limited purposes. So we have Murder, a colorless 2 black. This card's been reprinted quite a bit over Magic's history. Instant, destroy target creature. No drawbacks. Destroy target creature. So, yeah, in limited, I'm taking this card over pretty much anything that I see in the pack, unless the card outright wins the game when I play it, or, you know, just ridiculous value. Even then, I might even be like, it's not in my colors, so we're definitely going to take the Murder. I'll be just taking so many of these ham. This is a common.
Oh
This is
yeah.
a common, folks. I just want you to think about this. This card is reprinted at common. I am gonna, oh man, I'm gonna be taking this card so much ham over. Like, I'm gonna be like, oh, murder, oh, murder, oh, murder, and just be like, oh yeah, I got like 4 or 5 murders in my deck. Like black actually, the constructed cards are kind of interesting. I think overall for black is what I would say. The limited cards all kind of seem like pretty good bombs, right? Like just pretty good
hmm
cards that when you see like a couple of them, you're like, yeah, black's definitely open. You know, I want to move into that, or you know, like if I start off the draft with this in my first pick, a couple decent black cards in my second, third pick, and then like this in my fourth or fifth pick getting passed to me, still, I'm like, yeah, we're going to the moon with this one.
Yeah, we're doing it. All right.
Man, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just daydreaming over here about getting murder in the draft. Sorry. Ooh,
No, and that's okay. And if you're in draft, Murder's
ooh.
fantastic. It's just a great card. In constructed, Hero's Downfall's still legal,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't see a lot of play. You know, so at the end of the day, Murder is just not going to fit in constructed at all. Um, I don't believe. I think we just have better options. But for limited, my goodness, yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we got to move on because I'm just, oh
I
man.
know, right?
When I saw that they were reprinting this Anak comment, I was like, wow. So we have
Right.
another card here that's actually pretty interesting. Nightclubber. Either you can take it as the art of them clubbing someone in the head, or I'm just like getting like a nice little techno beat in my head and you know night clubbing. Colorless 2 black for a 2/2 human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. It has the blitz cost of 2 colorless and a black. Yeah, I mean you blitz it out. You can kind of kill some of your opponent's creatures if they're playing the citizens or in limited
hmm
specifically or in constructing you if they got other tokens or whatever out. As long as something's toughness 1 or less, you're gonna kill it. Or you can blitz it out and still get the value on top of that if you want to get a attack and a card draw off of it. So yeah, this card's just all star. I think overall, gonna be interesting if we end up seeing it in constructed.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic and limited. I think it'll be interesting to see how many of the cabaret, super go wide cards are really popular and constructed because that's going to dictate whether or not Nightclubber fits. Notably, Nightclubber is right at the same spot on curve as a meat hook for 1. Um, and so as a result, I don't think Nightclubber is going to see a lot of play because meat hook is just better. But at the same time,
That's a
for
sideboard
budget,
card, right?
it's
Maybe.
a could be a good sideboard card. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
appreciate that.
that's what I think more than anything. I think it's more of like a sideboard type card. Like, at least maybe until yeah, I agree with you on the Mihook part. I didn't even think about that. Like maybe until Mihook rotates, but I
Yeah,
think
once Meat Hook rotates,
overall,
totally different story. But yeah,
yeah, definitely. Like overall, I mean, against like red decks or like every time I'm like 1 toughness. I'm like Elite Spellbinder is 1 toughness. Luminarch Aspirant's 1 toughness if it doesn't get a counter on itself. Like there's all these cards in like the white deck that this card's really good against. So
true.
yeah, I mean, we'll see if either it ends up getting played now or later. I think overall it's more of a cyborg card on rate and it's too situational. You probably wouldn't ever play this main deck. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, I think it all depends on if if token strategies come back because And one advantage that this has over Meatuk is it does leave a 2/2 on board. So that is very, very meaningful. So if you don't blitz it in, if you just play it for 3, you downtick all of your opponent's creatures, and you're still sitting back with a 2/2. So if the Cabaretti Scoot Swarm deck that I suspect is a thing people are going to be brewing up, if that exists, if that becomes tech in the future, Nightclubber, I think, has a place to shut that down.
Hmm.
Um, because if your opponent just goes wide with a ton of scoots, you can just say no, stop it, and
We're
kill
going to the
all of them with
club.
this.
Get in the limousine. We're going to the club, Ham.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going clubbing. Yeah, I love it.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
let's
All
go.
right, let's go. So our next card here, we have another uncommon. Rafine's Silencer, 2 colorless and a black. Human Assassin. When this card enters the battlefield, it connives. Whenever this card dies, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. Um, yeah, it's a limited card, and on the mana cost a little bit high, I think, for constructed and limited. I mean, this card's really powerful. Like, you get to connive, and then when this card dies, let's say you connived and it's a 2/2, you get to kill something that's 2 toughness or less. I mean, and if you get to pump it up, let's say with, I don't know, enchantments, equipment, anything laying around the kitchen sink,
Hmm.
this card just gets a lot better, right? In limited specifically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a very powerful effect, and one thing that I can imagine doing, it is at 3, it's a little expensive for a 1/1 that is dependent on you discarding a non-land card to buff up to a 2/2.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, but that death trigger is very meaningful, and yeah, like you're saying, the idea of buffing it up with other effects and being able to take out a pretty sizable creature when being able to create a threat that your opponent needs to deal with, and then once they deal with it, you can eliminate one of their biggest creatures. That's a pretty cool scenario. Like yeah. So I think the upside is there on this card, but it is awfully expensive. So yeah, I don't expect to see it in constructed, but in limited, yeah, you're exactly right. It's, I'd imagine, quite strong.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more like death triggers off of
Hmm.
Black 2 right now, which is pretty interesting. And between the mythic all the way down to uncommons and commons is kind of interesting. So, I mean, on top of my pile of murders, I'll be taking this card and, be beating down with my 2/2 and, killing their creatures until they kill this and then hoping that I get to kill something or, they feared it the whole game. I mean, it's just a interesting value card that, does something when it comes into play, does something when it dies. In limited, it's not too terrible in the mana cost for the stats that you're potentially going to get with this and the value. So
Yeah,
that's mainly when you're going to see this.
and you can always sacrifice it to a casualty trigger like join the maestros. So that's, yeah, that
Exactly.
can
That's actually
provide.
a great point where,
Yeah.
right away, yeah, if you don't get the connive to get a +1/+1 counter, you might miss out on a casualty
Hmm.
resolution that you might need there. So quite an interesting take there on it for sure as well. I think we'll see that card in limited quite a lot. So I look forward to drafting it. Our next card here we have Revel Ruiner, 3 colorless and a black Cephalid Rogue, 3/1 with Menace. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, it connives. So I mean, essentially, it could end up being a 4 mana 4/2 with Menace. Limited card. Not really much to see here.
Yeah, decent limited card. I mean, Revolutioner, this is just party pooper, right? That's all we're looking at here.
Yeah, it's Wedding Crasher.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, yeah,
Storm the festival, but storm the festival without the storm.
exactly. Just, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. It's fine. I have many thoughts on the new artistic take on cephalids, but I'll keep that for a video essay later on. So I won't get into that here. Um,
No cephalid drama here, Ham.
no, no cephalid drama. I'll keep that for later. And if you do want to see that, my YouTube channel, Hamhawks42, is feel free to subscribe, and then there will probably be a cephalid rant before long. Anyway,
But yeah, Revel Ruiner, just a limited card. Next
yeah.
card here, pretty interesting. 2 colorless and a black Rogue's Gallery sorcery. For each color, return up to 1 target creature card of that color from your graveyard to your hand. Uh, Limited card, constructed, probably not, costs too much. But interesting how you could end up, for 3 mana you can get back 5 things if you're playing a 5 color deck, right?
Yeah, it feels like a very. I mean, it's kind of a. it's a build around card, which is something that's kind of interesting in a raised dead effect. But yeah, if you're running a 5 color deck anyway, or, if you're running a lot of hybrid creatures and those kinds of things, Rogue's Gallery could be a great way to refill your hand in the late game. So it's possible in the right deck, but I don't think that deck exists right now. So we'll see if Capenna brings that into the mix.
In the right deck and limited, this card's
Yeah,
could end up being great, but most of the time when I see a card like this, I'm just like, no. Like Blood
sure.
Fountain, I think was the best version of them, just because you got something up front, and the mana cost was so low on that card up front that 1 mana versus 3 mana, not really the same without the blood token either. So,
Yeah.
anytime I see a card that has rogues in it and it's probably not gonna get played, it makes me a lot happier. The world is in a better place. So the next card that we have here, Sanguine Spy, 2 colorless and a black, 2/3 Vampire Rogue, Menace and Lifelink. Colorless, sack another creature. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard at the beginning of your end step. If there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard, you may pay 2 life. If you do, you get to draw a card. I think this card is pretty fantastic. It's kind of like a Visser Seer with like Woe Strider type feels from it. Obviously, you're not getting a token on the Woe Strider side, but the ability of being able to sacrifice another creature and kind of filter through your deck. And it has Menace and Lifelink. I mean, it could get in there too. I mean, I don't know if like it not having 3 power matters. And limited, this card's great. And constructed, I think we'll see. Sacrificing stuff's cool, right?
Yeah, sacrificing stuff is great. I mean, having good sack engines can go a long way. It's very important. And so, yeah, I think you're right comparing this to Woe Strider. If only it had the goat. But anyway, not that that would make any sense here for a 0/1 goat to enter the battlefield with segments by drops. But I like the idea that at the beginning of your end step, if that you've achieved that delirium status that we've talked about, um, you can draw cards. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. So it's Woe Strider with Eye of Vecna. It's I don't know. I like it. I like it a lot actually.
Yeah, it's a pretty
Yeah.
interesting card. Like, it really does just scream value. It's got 2 abilities. The rate on it isn't terrible. You get to sack stuff to filter. You get to draw more cards on top of that. Like, you can filter the card on top, and then in your end step you could draw it if you need to, or you can so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, what I just feel like it's gonna get played. I'm just not too impressed by the stats. Like, it does a
Yeah.
lot. So for it doing a lot, I expect it to, maybe find a home somewhere. But I'm not sure if. Yeah, I like the Trespasser more. Whenever right now in
Mm.
black for 3 drops, I really like the Graveyard Trespasser from the Innistrad set, and I don't know. This does different things, so maybe this goes with the Eye Twitch deck. Maybe this goes with the Black Mythic. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name.
Oh, the Corpse Launderer
Yeah,
or
Corpse Launder. Thank you so
yeah, or
much.
Body Launderer. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe this goes
Yeah.
with the Body Launder. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's a very high ceiling for this card, and the floor isn't even bad either. The floor is you're like halfway in the room. You're not even
Right?
hitting the floor. So yeah, we'll see what happens with this card. I definitely say, limited, great card, constructed. We'll see what deck it goes into, but I do
Mhm.
expect it to get played eventually.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Next card is actually like an interesting one. Here we have a card that I feel like we can definitely kind of talk about it being, we're not sure what's going to happen with this, but it's another card that we know might end up getting played. Shadow Immortality, 13 colorless. You don't hear that every day. 13 colorless, 2 black, Avatar, 7/7. If your life total is less than your starting life total, this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the difference. Obviously, the first card everyone compares this to is Death's Shadow. I've seen talks about this getting played in Modern, where you have the explosive card that you flip a card and you deal them damage. I'm sorry, I can't remember what it's called, but like Erratic Explosion for anybody that played during Onslaught block. But yeah, I mean, is 7/7 enough for me to be at, I don't know, like 13 or whatever? I mean, it you gotta like you have to be at 7 for this to cost 2 black, right? So
Yeah.
that's like a lot of life. That is like Death's Shadow range, and I mean, Yeah, I don't know, man.
And I'm
I
right
don't
there
know
with you.
about this card.
I'm right there with you, and I think the design of it is interesting. I like the idea of cost reduction based on life total. Like that's a cool design space, but a vanilla 7/7 just isn't enough of a payoff for that, in my opinion. So it's a cool build around. It's a cool design. One shout out to that delirium effect we were talking about. It will be the only 15 drop in your deck. So getting that into your graveyard could be useful for that. So there's something there. Also in EDH, so in Commander, where cards there are certain commanders that care about cards with high mana values, like Eureka the Tiger Shadow. Shadow of Mortality fits into that deck beautifully because it can deal 15 damage to the whole board right off the top. Just because of its incredibly high casting cost on the card. So in that kind of context, like if you care about a high mana value, it's great. But if you're just playing it out as a creature in a 60 card, standard or historic format, I don't know that it's enough. If you're running, if you have a deck that can support something like Scourge of the Skyclaves
Yeah, that
or Death
card's way
Shadow,
better.
yeah, like Death Shadow is in historic right now. So if you have a Death Shadow deck already, slotting in one or two Shadow of Mortality as an additional threat that your opponent has to deal with, all right, cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't have that style of deck already, I don't think Shadow of Mortality is enough of a reason to build one.
Yeah, like Death Shadow I can play when I'm at 10. I can play when I'm at
Mhm.
12. It'll be a 1-1-2-2. This I have to actually be at 7. I have to be at like 8 for it to be reasonable. It costs 3 mana for a 7/7, but I mean, there is a big difference between 3, 2 and 1, and
Mhm.
Scourge the Skyclave demon, the avatar definitely also comes into my mind immediately, where I'm like, man, like that card's better because that card always costs 2, and later you can kick it for 7 if you need to make each player lose some life. And I don't know, I think this card's just a one of those cards that they just wanted to have. I feel like as like a really cool design, and if it gets played, it gets played, but I don't really see it. I just feel like it's not good enough. It needed to be like a
Mhm.
10/10. If it's a 10/10, then we're talking is then 3-4 mana for a 10/10, then maybe I could argue for it. But if we're talking like Death Shadow decks, I mean, those decks are like mana efficient. Most of the cards in their deck don't cost more than 2 mana, right? Like,
Mhm.
so if you're playing like 3 or 4 mana for even a 10/10, I mean, that's not even in 2022 Magic stakes, that's not even really that impressive without any abilities, right? It just dies or gets blocked by the anvil tokens.
Right. I was just thinking, like, even a 7/7 or like maybe an 8/8, give it trample. Like all
Menace.
of a sudden, like just something like that is all this would take. Or if they really get, I mean, personally, this is what I would want to see, but I know they'll never do this in a standard legal set. Why not give it shadow?
It's a
Let's just
shadow
anyway.
immortality, right?
Yeah, I mean, come on, it's right there. Anyway,
You could
shadow
have
being a
brought
very
Shadow back.
weird.
It would have been cool, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be a blast. But yeah, Shadow's a different. It's a mechanic where a creature with Shadow can only block and be blocked by other creatures with Shadow. So it basically means it's unblockable and can't block in most situations.
They could have
Um,
errated it, right? They could have like maybe like errated it. Maybe it like did something.
yeah,
Maybe
maybe.
more the rules the way it was said. Maybe it was a little bit more easier. Like only creatures with Shadow can block other creatures with Shadow. That way you don't have to worry about like a big line of paragraph of text on top and then having to explain to people that Shadow's pretty much pseudo unblockability. But yeah, I mean for flavor wise, I mean I love Shadow, but yeah, I mean this card it seems really cool, and I know that there's probably some people excited for it, but for me, I feel like it kind of misses on
Yeah,
what it wants to do and probably ends up getting played in random decks that you wouldn't expect it to be played in.
yeah,
This
I'm
next
kind of right
card
there with
though.
you.
Now this is a real deal. This card expected to see this. Shakedown heavy, 2 colorless and a black for a 6/4 Ogre Warrior with Menace. Whenever this card attacks, offended player may have you draw a card. If they do, you untap it and remove it from combat. Essentially, this is Phyrexian Arena. If your opponent wants to not take any damage. Otherwise than that, I mean, Ham, this card,
It's so good.
like on rate, this is like talk about 2022 Magic. I mean, yeah, it's just a casual 3 mana 6/4 with Menace. No big deal here. I mean, Love Struck Beast. I mean, no big deal here.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, and if you want to stop me, I mean, I have to draw cards. I mean, oh no. Um, like oh no.
Yeah, I mean the floor on this is a Phyrexian arena where you don't lose life and you get a good blocker.
Yeah,
Like,
you get a 6/4.
I
Ugh.
it's insane. The fact that you untap it, like if your opponent chooses to take it out of combat and you draw a card. I mean, this card has no downside. Like giving your opponent an option feels like it should be really, really bad. But in this case, I'm happy either way. Pick whichever you want. It's yeah, it's so good. And having a 6/4/4/3 unlocks a lot of crazy things with this set as well. With the casualty X's and things like
Fight
another card
rigging.
that we talked about in our spoiler video that we haven't done green yet, so we haven't gotten into the
Hmm.
full deep dive. But fight rigging, just gonna go ahead and put a little plug there. Fight rigging, Shakedown Heavy do some crazy good things. So keep an eye out for a green spoiler review for that one, the full breakdown on how that works. But yeah, Shakedown Heavy is phenomenal. This card is gonna be everywhere, and I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Yeah, this card just seems like I don't even know how to feel. I just read it and I'm like, man, it's a 6/4/3. It doesn't even matter. Like, you attack, either they just take a huge chunk of their life, or you draw a card. Like, that's so powerful. This card's going to be eating a lot of removal spells, but then it's also going to lead the way into more of your powerful 4 and 5 drops, specifically in black as well. And then later in the game, if you connived enough on your body launderer,
Hmm.
then you just get back your heavy, and then before you know it, you're drawing cards again. And yeah, all this sounds like what we're probably going to end up seeing here. This card's just, man, this card's crazy for like a mid-range card, right?
Oh yeah,
Like,
mid
get two
range
of
and
them
even
down,
like
and then you're drawing 2 cards a turn.
yeah. No, as somebody who played a lot of Clackbridge Troll back in the day, I can attest it works. Yeah, it's great. Feels wonderful.
Yeah, it's
So
like the I forget what the demon was called, but it was a 4 mana 6/6, and then they had Desecration Demon, I think it was.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the saga creature, and you tapped it, but then it got a +1/+1 counter on it. And
Hmm.
this card's kind of like, I mean, it's a 6/4, it has menace. I mean, this, man, ooh, what happened? What are we doing with this card? This card's a beating, man. I
It
don't want
is.
to lose this card. When my opponent plays it for the first time, I'm not gonna know what to do. I'm gonna be like, do I take 6 or do I let them draw a card? Like, I don't know what I want them to do. Like, that all
Yeah,
sounds bad.
you really hope you have a murder in your hand when you see this. Yeah.
Yeah, get those Inferno Graphs ready. Like, you're gonna see this. So yeah, that card's just straight gasoline. This
Hmm.
next card's actually just a reprint, not really much to talk about here. Colorless and a black Tavern Swindler. 2/2 Human Rogue. Tap it. You pay 3 life, you flip a coin. If you win the flip, you gain 6. Yeah, not gonna
Eh.
get swindled by this one.
Nope.
So next card. This card's actually really, really good, I think. I expect this to get played in multiple formats, potentially. We have Tenacious Underdog, colorless and a black human warrior 3/2. The blitz cost is 2 colorless, 2 black. You pay 2 life. You may cast this card from your graveyard using its blitz ability. So on rate, 2 mana 3/2 comes into play untapped. It can attack, it can block. Seems great to me. It's got a relevant creature type. It's a warrior. On top of that, the blitz ability, later in the game, you can just start recasting it from your graveyard. Potentially it'll trade with something. At the cost of 2 life, it could trade with something and then draw you a card as well. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, how do you feel about this card? When I first saw this, I was like, wow, this card's strong. Like, this is like, we haven't seen a good recursive black threat for a while. Like, Skyclave Shade filled that role for like a little bit, but
Hmm.
I think that this card could end up being the real deal. I'm more high on this card just because it blocks, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 3/2 for 2, even in 2 relevant creature types in human warrior. So those there might even be synergies there that we haven't even touched on. So yeah, I think this card's great. The fact that the blitzing you have to pay 2 life definitely hurts, but you're swinging with a 3/2, and when it dies, regardless of when it dies, you draw a card. So that's worth it for sure. You're just getting the additional card is absolutely fantastic. Um, yeah, I think I think the card's great. Like, I don't know what else to say. It's a great design. Um, Also, when I first saw the artwork, I immediately thought of Tassiger because the dude just kind of it's the same similar pose, similar body type. I was like, wait, Tassiger, man, you got jacked, and I thought you were jacked before. Yeah, but no, it is a different character for anyone who's curious. But anyway, that was no,
Tenacious
it's a great card.
Tassiger.
It just looks like Tassiger. I can't help it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna see this card. I really do. I'm a big fan of it. I think that we've gone over between this and the heavy. I think those are two
Mhm.
like really good black rares that uh kind of give some more beef to black and maybe give like potential to some different types of decks. Because this card is like, this card's great on the curve at all the time, and on top of that, it's a nice little graveyard payoff. Or like if you're self milling and you hit like one or two of these, you're not too upset because later in the game, whenever you can grind your opponent out, you can start grinding them down even more with this card by chipping away at life totals, chipping away at creatures, and drawing some more cards. So I expect to see this card quite a lot. That's kind of about how I feel when I saw it. So yeah, get ready to see some tenacious underdogs beating you down. Get ready for some exile. You're gonna need some exile in this set for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
This next card I'm excited for limited as well. We have Vampire Scrivener. 4 colorless and a black for a 2/2 Vampire Warlock with flying. Whenever you gain life during your turn, you put a counter on it. Whenever you lose life during your turn, you put a counter on it. So essentially, it's a Pride Mate. And also, whenever you lose life, you get to put a counter. So, yeah, I mean, if you got some life gain, if you got, but if both players have their Meathook Massacres going, it'll be great. But that's like a dream. In Constructed, I don't really see this card getting played. In Limited, it'll be good if you have some way of continually gaining life or paying life, pretty much. Other than that, 5 mana 2/2 flying. I like it because it has the potential to grow huge. I mean, usually I like the 5 mana flying cards like this, so I'm a little more skeptical on it just because it starts as a 2/2. If it started out as a 3/3, I would be like, yeah, this card's great. I definitely think I'm going to take this card. But as a 2/2, I mean, it dies to so many more things, so I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, I think you're right.
We'll
The
see.
upside on this card is there, but it's very squishy at first, and that is a problem.
Yeah, we'll see. So our next card here, our last card actually, we have. It is a monster theme set. We got Whack, 3 colorless and a black sorcery. This spell costs 3 less to cast. If it targets a white creature, target creature gets -4/-4 until on a turn. Should have been an instant. That's how
Yes.
I feel about Whack. Even in limited, I mean, the -3/-3 mill card almost has more value than this.
Right.
Specifically if you're not targeting white creatures. Probably still take it because, yeah, like I said, I love me removal, but listen, folks, this card just costs a little bit too much mana to sorcery, so I think this card needs to get whacked.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, when you compare this to something like Grave Enfeeblement, like, I mean, granted, if limit is the only place you would consider grabbing whack. But the card is just, even as a sideboard card in constructed, it's just not there. It's not good enough, I don't think. Because yeah, something like Grave Enfeeblement still exists. You
It's
know.
not the Hinata answer.
Right.
That, especially after post rotation or whatever, it's just not really the answer that you want. Even at 1 black mana, not really a fan of this card.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a good sideboard card, but I feel like it's almost like the opposite.
Yeah.
All right, so that goes ahead and wraps up our review for Black New Streets of New Capenna. Excuse me.
Mhm.
But thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the content, hit the subscribe button for the channel. It'd be greatly appreciated. Like the video, leave a comment down below. Hammer, where can we find you at?
You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhawks42, or you can just Google hamhawks42. I'm the only person rocking that screen name out there. So yeah, yeah, I'd love to see you on all the various platforms, whether that's Twitter, YouTube, here at the Pizza Box. I'm here quite often, and then also on Twitch. Yeah.
You can find me twitch.tv/Hollywoodpizza, primarily the host of the Pizza Box. We have a tournament this Sunday. It's historic best of 3. It's free to play with cash prizes. Definitely check that out. All these links are going to be in the description down below. But I do appreciate you joining us for this video. And as always, stay cheesy.